there. Welcome to Healing Outside the Box. My name is Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach. The topic for today is, why are cancer rates increasing at younger ages? Now, I'm not a physician, nor do I specialize in cancer research, so in no way should you rely on the information here to make any decisions about your own health. Please seek care from your doctor for advice and guidance on your medical issues. Now, first, a few housekeeping things before I get to the increasing cancer rate material. I just heard that the HIP, or Healthy Incentives Program, now includes families of children eligible for free or reduced school lunches. This is the case in Massachusetts. But because it's a federal program, other states are at least eligible. So here's how it works. If you go to the farmer's market, and right now it's mid-August, so peak time, and you buy produce there, you can present your qualifying card, either a SNAP card or the school lunch program card, and you may be eligible for $40 worth of completely free produce every month. And in Massachusetts, it runs through the winter as well, so I can get squashes and onions throughout the winter. If you're interested and don't know how to pursue it, you can send me a note on my website contact page at healingoutsidethebox.com, and I will let you know who you can call to see if the program is running in your town. Okay, the second thing. I mentioned a few weeks ago that my memoir is now out on paperback, and I anticipate the audiobook version will be available in about a month. What I failed to do is to tell you the name of the book and describe what it's about. Silly me. The title is Helpers Anonymous, a disabled woman's experiences with home care during the opioid epidemic. The reason I hesitate to talk about the details of my book on the podcast is that it is fairly graphic and exposes some of the parts of my life that I find difficult to talk about. I didn't want to feel vulnerable on my podcast about healthy eating and overall wellness, but then I realized it goes against one of the themes I meant to convey in the book. That is, that we are all similar in so many ways, and it is most often a good thing when we can share how we are feeling. At some point in our lives, we will all fall ill and need the help of both family and professional caregivers. And we shouldn't feel so vulnerable that it's hard to talk about. Having said all that, I'm just going to read from my blurb on my Amazon author page. So here is the blurb to Helpers Anonymous. This true story invites us into a world that we seldom see, but are eventually bound to experience, living with caretakers who help us do what we once did independently. Equal parts comical and heartbreaking, Jean Tiberio takes us on her journey as she struggles with and adapts to living with a neuromuscular disease. The story spans 20 years, beginning in the 90s, when the opioid epidemic was becoming apparent. A sudden rise in opioid addicts, coinciding with a sudden drop in legally available opioids, created a desperation for prescription drugs never seen before in this country. As hospitals and rehab facilities instituted drug testing and Corey checks to ensure employees were clean, one healthcare option stood alone as a place to easily obtain painkillers. That place was home health care, and the employees were personal care attendants. Jean exposes her daily life with her personal care attendants on the front lines at that turbulent time. her relationships with her caregivers can be meaningful or traumatic, but ultimately she reveals that there are lessons to be learned from adversity. She emerges both happier and wiser. Okay, that was the blurb. Now, I'm not very good at leading with my feelings, but basically that's the gist of the story. If you decide to read my memoir and want to jot down a rating and review on Amazon, I would greatly appreciate it. Now back to the podcast. Why are cancer rates increasing at younger ages? This story has been showing up all over the media recently, but the journal article that sparked the story was from a study published a few years ago. It all started with a huge review study put out by the National Institute of Health, but several articles followed up with their version of it. There was an article in The Guardian only a month ago in July comparing the recent rates of different cancers to cancer rates prior to 1990. They tell us something that we pretty much already know, which is, until recently, cancer was seen as a disease of old age. Here is a quote from the article in The Guardian. I'll put the link in the show notes. Quote, between 1990 and 2019, cancer rates increased by 22% in the age group 25 to 29. Rates of cancer in the next age group, 30 to 34, are at the highest level ever. Among the 14 cancer types on the rise, 8 are related to the digestive system. Colorectal cancer increased by 70% from 1990 to 2019. End quote. And having read all that, I do realize that until 100 years ago, people normally did not live into the 70s and 80s. It was generally infectious diseases, of course childbirth and war, that did young people in prior to that. Even so, these are startling numbers. Colorectal cancer is directly related to food, or more specifically what's in food, and that increased by 70%. Experts also suggest that 1/3 of all cancers can be prevented by lifestyle and dietary measures alone. They include stress management and physical activity in that, so it's not just food. Things that can contribute to an increasing cancer risk include obesity, nutrient-sparse foods, high in sugars and other processed food items, obviously diabetes, low fiber intake, consumption of red meat and processed meat products, and an imbalance of omega-3 and omega-6 fats. When I was first learning about what causes cancer in school, viruses were mentioned as a risk factor for cancers, but now it is seen as secondary to a diet-related lowered immunity to viruses. In other words, people who are overweight and or diabetic have a less than optimal immune system, so that when they get a virus, it is more likely to mutate healthy cells, making the virus worse or more virulent, and the risk of developing abnormal cells leading to tumors greater. As we all know, different types of cancer cells affect different organs. It seems to me that skin cancer is one of the easier types to look at because there are 3 basic kinds of cancers that affect the skin. There's basal cell carcinoma, which is benign and basically just keeps growing in the same spot. There's squamous cell carcinoma, which is generally considered benign but must be removed because it tends to be a little more aggressive. And then there's the melanoma, which makes us all nervous in the thin skin community, meaning Irish, Scottish, British, etc. With the possible exception of skin cancers, the risk factors are pretty similar. Smoking, obviously, tops the list, excessive alcohol, obesity, physical inactivity, actions that mutate cells, such as sunburns and tanning beds and CAT scans, toxins, such as herbicides, manufacturing chemicals, and last but not least, poor dietary habits. But what specifically about the diet is increasing cancer risk? Scientists are now very interested in the link between what we eat when we are young and the balance of healthy and pathogenic bacteria in our gut. Evidence now suggests that there are microbiota in our gut that might be linked to our risk of early onset cancer. This is a quote from the Guardian article. Quote, "The microbiome contains billions of microbes that live inside us, largely in the gut, and play a key role in overall health, such as digestion, regulation of the immune system, and protecting against disease-causing bacteria. Increasing evidence indicates that eating ultra-processed foods, particularly those high in saturated fat and sugar, alters the composition of the microbiome in negative ways." End quote. The World Health Organization states that more than 80% of the processed food sold in Britain is considered unsafe for marketing to children. So it's more than Fruit Loops. The National Cancer Institute also agrees with WHO, or WHO. This was published in June 15th of this year by the NCI. Quote, "In the U.S., the rate of early onset cases rose by almost 18% between 2000 and 2019, even as cancer declined slightly in older adults, according to data from the NCI. Now, by early onset, they're talking about people in their 20s. Here's another quote. "Limiting access to ultra-processed foods is only possible if policies are put in place to subsidize healthier options, especially for low-income families." End quote. That's why that HIP program I spoke about should be happening in every town in this country 12 months a year. Let's subsidize local farming, and we can get fresh food year-round by utilizing high-tech indoor farming. In my opinion, this is just barely a start, because the problem is in part related to industrial farming and substituting real healthy food for high-fructose corn syrup, herbicides, preservatives, and other crappy corn byproducts. Here's another quote. "Investing in prevention is essential for a productive workforce and lower healthcare costs." Notice it says lower. Why treat what can be prevented? Better cancer survival outcomes are important, but equally important is preventing cancer developing in the first place. And currently, a childhood diet of ultra-processed foods is already contributing to health problems, with evidence increasingly linking it to the shocking rise of cancers in young people. Governments can't wait another decade to take it on. End quote. Amen to that. Now I'm going to have to stop here and make this a two-parter, because I want to spend some time on what the heck we can do about this as individuals. And I haven't even gotten to the NIH yet. They'll have something to say. So that's all for now. I'll be back very soon with another episode of Healing Outside the Box.